Hello, this is Ralph K. Ginorio. This is the 10th installment in the video adaptation on my lessons on the historical background behind the 9/11 attacks. Instead of going into the rise of Islam with this particular video, I'm going to take one more excursion into understanding the role that Christianity plays in the history of our civilization. Last time I left off with the replacement of a Roman Empire in the West with a Dark Age, a series of barbaric German and Gothic kingdoms, but the only aspect of the ancient world to survive intact was the Western Christian Church. Now, before going on to Islam, and I'm going to explain why this matters. If you put all your eggs in one basket, you'd better watch that basket real close and make sure nothing bad happens to it. The Greco-Roman world, the Roman Empire, was the ancient world's big basket. All of the civilizations that rose around the Mediterranean Sea and in Western Europe, from the Celts of the British Isles all the way to the people of Armenia on the borders between the Roman world and the Persian world, had their fates joined by the Roman Empire. Even the Persian Empire that developed after Parthia in the early centuries of the Christian era was in some way connected to a reflection of and involved with the Roman world. Not totally, but partially. So all of the eggs of the ancient world were in that great imperial Roman basket. The knowledge, the philosophy, the science, the theater, the lifestyle, learning how to make an effective hot bath, all of those things were wrapped up in the Roman world. It's like the farmers of Ireland 150 years ago, 160 or 70 years ago, who decided that what they were going to do was grow potatoes as their cash crop, and who but an idiot would grow anything but the most efficient kind of potato? So the Irish farmers all began to grow the same type of potato. And when a blight came that was able to target that one particular type of potato, the Irish potato famine resulted. Too much over-specialization in one thing caused the whole economy of Ireland and the caloric intake of its people to be dependent upon one strain among the hundreds or thousands of strains of potatoes that exist worldwide. And that one strain was vulnerable, and it blighted the potatoes. Well, the ancient world had placed itself in the hands of Rome. And Rome was brought down by its inability to decide who would become emperor when the old emperor died, which caused constant civil wars. It used lead in pipes, which caused ongoing progressive birth defects among the most civilized of Romans. The Roman people became soft and decadent. You know, there's a hidden subtext in George Lucas's Star Wars stories that I'm sure Mr. Lucas doesn't like, because Mr. Lucas is a profoundly liberal or progressive man. As Lucas tells the story of the fall of his galactic republic, he tells the story of a republic with no military, protected by a series of mystical samurai called Jedi Knights. And the crisis that the Jedi Knights come to is when the Republic no longer is filled with cooperative people. The Jedi Knights are simply too few and far between to keep the peace. How are you going to get a military? Ultimately, there's a choice between a military of robots and a military of clones. At no time does Lucas allow his storytelling to grapple with the central issue. If the people of the Republic wanted freedom, they had to join the military, wear the uniform, take the risks of a soldier, and fight for it. Freedom isn't free. And because they sat back and let other people fight for them, they lost their freedom in the story of the Star Wars movies. Well, he gets that idea from Imperial Rome. As the centuries wore on, as the crisis of the 3rd century led to the sort of theocratic Roman government of the 4th and 5th centuries, fewer and fewer Romans were willing to take the risk and put on the uniform and wear the danger and the risk and make the good of their society their personal concern. How does the Roman Empire project power and defend itself in an era of more and more effete males that don't take on the role of men and protect their society? Well, the Romans go to the only real men that they know, the barbarians of the German tribes and the Goths. They take their enemies. Now, at first, when the Romans bring their enemies in, they bring them in as Roman soldiers. The Germans and Goths have to learn Latin. They serve under Roman officers. They live in the Roman style. But as Rome becomes weaker and finds fewer and fewer soldiers to fill the ranks, the Germans and Goths start coming in on their own terms, speaking their own languages, under their own officers, then fighting in their own style. So you have effectively barbarian armies fighting for Rome against barbarian armies fighting against Rome. The empire, for reasons that are very Roman, that have to do with the Roman psyche, is brought to a point of crisis and collapse because the Roman Imperium is ultimately built on the notion of civic virtue, which came about during the Republic, where the leaders of Rome were the conscript fathers, where the men who took the first rank in battle were the richest because they could afford more armor than anyone else. And when that civic virtue died, the willingness to make the good of their society their personal business, Rome collapsed. When they had an empire, but with republican forms with no succession, the empire collapsed. So what's left behind? The church. And a society that during the dark ages of the 400s through the 800s, 900s, or the year 1000, depending upon where you are, the dark ages is lit by the guttering flames of church candles. The church, the Christian church, is spread in every Roman city and town and village. The imperial hierarchy is mirrored by the ecclesiastical hierarchy of the Roman Church. And so the only people who think on a continental scale after the fall of the Roman Empire in 476 in the West are clerics of the Christian faith. The only people who learn to read and write, who are educated, are clerics of the Christian faith. And the books are gathered by clerics of the Christian faith and copied by monks. The Christian church is revivified by the Benedictine notion of group monasteries, taking the Eastern tradition of Hermetism and bringing it into a Western group context that creates some of the most dynamic factories of ideas and production during the Dark Ages, the Benedictine monasteries. If you, in the Middle Ages, need to get married, you go to the church. If you're born, you go to the church. If you die, you go to the church. If you need healing, you go to the church. If you need education, you go to the church. The church is the center of life. The church bells bring people together and send people out to do their work, much as a heart brings blood in need of oxygen and sends it out through the lungs with oxygen and nutrients from the stomach to give life to the body. The church is the living, breathing heart of Christian society. So Western Europe during the Middle Ages is also known as Christendom. The Christian faith is the nucleus around which our Western civilization grows. It is the mote of dust around which the raindrop forms. It is the Christian notion of the human spirit as being made in God's image, of inestimable, priceless value, that is the basis for the development of notions of human rights that ultimately lead to the Enlightenment philosophies that lead to the American Republic. The Christian notion that everyone, slaves, women, children, the disabled, that everyone has value and everyone is beloved of God. Nowhere else on earth do you have the prime idea of a society, the core belief around which everything coheres, so humane. Christian notions of the nature of life, the universe, the value of human life, are the basis of our Western or Occidental civilization. And it is this civilization, distinct from pagan Greece and Rome, that becomes us. Greece and Rome are our parents and grandparents. Egypt and Mesopotamia, our great-grandparents. But we begin as us in the Germanic and Gothic kingdoms of the Dark Age, informed by the Christian faith. We come from Christendom. Christendom is the infant version of our Western civilization. We are of that. And that which unifies everyone from the United States of America, through Australia, through Britain, France, Germany, even Poland, and into Russia to some extent, are these Western ideas that are the fusion of the remnants of the Greco-Roman world preserved by the Church, the notions of freedom and lifestyle freedom that come from the free folk that follow German kings and Gothic kings, and the Christian, Judeo-Christian notions of the presence of God, a loving God, and the value of human life. And these ideas slowly percolate and develop, and you end up with the spread of the notion that human beings have value and are of inestimable price, going from one individual in Egypt, the god king Pharaoh, now to today, everyone, convicted felons, the disabled, the youngest child, the oldest old person, all have human rights, and we all speak about them as an accomplished fact. This is one of the results of the Christian core of our Western civilization. So, it's in this context that our history develops, and this is the connection between the events behind 9/11 and this particular aspect of the history. We are descendants of the Christian faith. Just because the United States in my lifetime is flirting with the notion of being religiously neutral doesn't mean that we are not Christian to the core in our basic assumptions. It's not just the days of the week or the way we count years. The notion of being good, the transcendent notion of being good that I've heard Wiccans express and atheists express, are all, if they come from the United States, expressed in basically Christian terms that deal with the humanity, the value of human life, and the precious freedom that human conscience should have, both of which are Christian notions. And our enemies certainly think of us as Christians. They call American troops in the Middle East crusaders. So whether you're a practicing Christian or whether you don't even like Christianity, understand that from the year 225, when the Council of Nicaea is established, up through at least the late 1960s, we were a proudly and self-consciously Christian society that was at times tolerant of other faiths. Only within my lifetime, since the mid to late 60s, are we flirting with this notion of not being anything, of being religiously neutral or even hostile to Christianity. And we'll see how that goes, because it is basically antithetical to the heart of our civilization. So, now that I've made the case for the relevance of Christianity to the history of our society, next lesson will be on the rise of Islam. Thank you.